Hello there. My name is Jonathan Friedman, and you're listening to FAQs by EHN Canada. This is a show where we scour the internet for the most frequently asked questions about mental health and addiction and ask an expert for their answers to them. Today, it is my pleasure to introduce our guest, Jeanne Foote. Jeanne Foote is the founder and CEO of the Recovery Concierge, a premier service for mental health, addiction recovery, trauma healing, and peak performance. Between her own lived experience, credentials as an international certified alcohol and drug counselor, and trainings in hypnotherapy, neurolinguistic programming, and somatic work, Jen is often called the best kept secret in the world of recovery. She brings a unique, holistic 360-degree approach to treatment, guiding individuals and their families through the complex journey of addiction and healing. Jen and her team offers a comprehensive range of services, including interventions and assessments, alcohol management, sober companionship, case management, and long-term relapse prevention. Their work is grounded in an integrated, trauma-informed model that meets clients wherever they are with compassion, strategy, and unwavering support. Jen, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, Jonathan. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to have a chat with you.
It's an absolute pleasure. Now, as mentioned before, we're going to get into the five big questions. But before we do, so many people who are in this space are brilliant, intelligent people, and somehow they end up in mental health compared to anywhere else. I'm wondering, of all the fields, why did you choose this space?
I didn't really choose this field, it chose me. And what I mean by that is that I come from a family of intergenerational trauma with at least three generations that I'm aware of, and mental illness. And it was what I always knew as my normal, unfortunately. So when I finally was awakened to there must be a better way, that's what set me on a quest through my own lived experience, which was finding recovery in 1993 to go into treatment and really not addressing the trauma. I had complex PTSD and I've lived with it for almost 6 decades now. And so to be honest, like we knew what to do with like complex physical trauma, but we've never known what to do with emotional trauma until just recently. Now, trauma is a buzzword and trendy, but at this time, like in those days, nobody knew what to do. So even though I disclosed it, it was the one thing that was left untreated. And so I would consequently go back and use again or relapse again. And I thought there's got to be a better way because I was 7 years in, I was stone cold sober and feeling very, very unwell. And that's very much a part of my journey is finding solutions that are sustainable, not just for myself, for my family, but for others as well.
That's super interesting. And I find actually like so many people in this space come from a lived experience perspective. And something that I think is really unique about you and your story and the work you do, ever since that first conversation we had, is like you really take the word holistic on. I think a lot of different services talk about holistic, meaning like there's so many pieces to that puzzle. And you do so much work there. And I think that's absolutely incredible.
Thank you. Well, I want to address that mental health is nuance. We know what to do with broken bones and cardiac procedures, and we know how to treat cancer, but we don't know how to treat mental health because there's a lot of nuance in it. And even if we take a biopsychosocial model into effect, like there's still a lot that we have to tease out. And I think what really complicates it with addiction in particular is how do we sequence treatment? Not just knowing what to do, but sequences. So, like, you're not going to start trauma therapy with someone who has an acute addiction because that's not going to work. They're not going to get out of the addiction that way. And we need to stabilize people before we start going a little deeper. So, there is, I think that's what makes it so challenging for people. Like, they may think that this is prescriptive and maybe helpful, which it could be, but there's also a sequencing and a timing to that. And I think that's an important consideration. And the other thing I wanted to address, which I didn't when you asked me how I got into this, is that because of my own personal history, and I say three generations, my children had challenges too. And that's not surprising because I had challenges and I passed it on to them, not from a necessary genetic, but it could be from an environmental perspective. And so for me, that's when I recognize this stops here at this generation. And my children receive the help and they're thriving now. They're all in their 30s and they're thriving with their own families. So we've really created a foundation for the fourth generation, which is now I'm very blessed to have, and they're thriving. They're being brought up very
Congratulations.
differently. Yeah, thank you very much.
That I think, I feel like in media and even in my own personal conversations, the concept of generational trauma, has come up quite a bit, and it's really about finding the courage to say and notice all of the pieces around you and say, "The buck stops here, and maybe that won't affect me so much. Maybe it'll affect my kids a bit, but that 4th generation, the generation after that will really, really, benefit from that courage." So I think that's fantastic, Jen.
Thank you. The thing I'm most proud of, really, because that's what it was all about is like changing the trajectory for future generations. Because I think they say if you change one generation, you change like seven down. So, like, really, we're all a product of our own evolution. So, and we want to evolve healthier and better as we go along. So,
Totally. So today we're gonna be really diving into compassion fatigue and burnout. And I feel like a lot of caregivers sort of are the first, we'll call them victims of this. So, our first question for today is, how would you define compassion fatigue? Is it different than general burnout? Is it similar? Um,
mhm.
what is it?
Well, I think it's definitely different than general burnout. I think burnout is general burnout is indicative of your own doing, right? Like, you decided that you are going to work longer hours or you fall into like a lot of entrepreneurs are classic burnout. And I could say that I probably have some firsthand experience with this because in your quest to want to do better or have impact in the world, you have this idea or innovation come and suddenly before you know it you work harder than you do for other people when you're an entrepreneur. There's no question. So I think that we get into something and unfortunately I think it's rewarded. Like when we're compensated for something that we do, it has somewhat of an addictive quality, but it also there's a practicality to it. Like we need financials to live on, right? And to make a life for ourselves and pay the mortgage and all the things and eat. So, where compassion fatigue, I believe, really stems from trying to have an impact in a service position. Let's generally call service position could be as an employer, as a leader, it could be a therapist, it could be a recovery coach, a peer support, it could be many different ways of what that looks like. But in their quest to try to serve, they overcompensate, I think. And there's an old classic, and it took me a long time to understand this myself that I don't work harder than my clients at their recovery. But there was a time where I probably did. I overcompensated. I just wanted it so badly for them. You want them to have this experience because it is available for everyone, but not everybody can find it or access it at that time, right? Depending on the timeliness of when someone meets someone. So I think there's this earnest to try to get it right, to try to do all they can. And I think in the quest of service as well, we can sometimes try to overcompensate our own inadequacies as well. Because there is a thing that when we serve, we feel good, just like giving feels good. So I think there's a practicality to it as well. But they are distinctly different because one is self induced and one is really out of I would say, is initiated out of genuine caring and service for the position or role that you're playing.
I really felt what you were saying there, where not only, like, are you giving your all to make something really successful,
Mhm.
something useful, and something powerful, but you can be going and hanging out with family members, and they will note you as the hustler, and it's a good thing. Even if you're working 80 hours a week, 90 hours a week, and that's not necessarily, a positive thing for your mental health. Whereas compassion fatigue is something where certainly as, like, a caregiver, somebody who a social worker, a psychologist,
Mhm.
psychotherapist, y you don't get into that space even really necessarily because of the money. Like, we know, like, in Canada, for example, like, I started out as a child and youth counselor. I think I worked 3 jobs to be able to pay my rent and my car bill, and for me, it didn't matter because I got to do, like, the coolest job in the world, and I got to be that space. But you do it because you care, and caring takes a lot of energy and it takes a lot of mindfulness to know how to compartmentalize, how to be able to go home after work and, have a relationship and have and have a life outside without, feeling that fatigue.
I agree with you. Like, you're never gonna work harder than anybody who's an entrepreneur. There's no question because 'cause you're doing so many jobs at once. It's not to say that you can't work hard, but, with compassion fatigue, and if you can take it into the physical world of illness, right? Such as looking after someone who's palliative or who's ailing, right? And they're physically as well as emotionally, it has the same toll on that caregiver. And that's why they introduce respite care. It's absolutely vital that you can step back and get some perspective on whatever's going on in that individual's life who's caregiving, because the truth is it becomes all consuming for the individual who's really the who's like, that's a very different role than a therapist, which is an hour after an hour. But when you listen to hour after hour of people's problems all day long, all week long, that can have an emotional buildup on that individual, just like physical caregiving has the same thing. So we do need respite care. We need to be able to step away and gain perspective and bring our own internal barometer down so that we can think clearly and move forward accordingly.
That's great. And that's a fantastic segue into our next question, which is that barometer. What are the most common early warning signs of compassion fatigue? Like, what are the things that, for our listeners listening right now, what are the things that they can start to notice themselves? What are the tells?
I think you start to break your own integrity. I think that's one of the most important indicators. I know that's very global, but it can look like, missing things that are important to you. It could be for people in recovery, like meetings. It could be not following up with doctor's appointments. It starts with sleep that's not, is not as regulated as normal, and bedtimes. It could be diet poor choices because you're on the go. You don't have time to eat. You don't have time to meditate. So when you're in those situations, you need to meditate, you need to eat. But when we're in it, we feel like everything's so urgent that we're not. And then I think then once we lose perspective on our physiology levers, our psychology levers start playing out and falling out of place. And then we can't see clearly. And so it may look like perfectionism. It may look like it's never good enough, or you keep trying harder, or, different levels like that. I think and so then shame, it can be shame, like it wasn't perfect. So then you're going to be all consuming and the inner critic starts coming out. I just think it's almost like you lose your grounding when you're in that place. And it's hard to really see in that moment until you have either a moment of clarity or someone's able to mirror it back to you that, hey, let's get some perspective on stuff. You're overworked. And so interesting. I just had my colleague call me out on that this week. She goes, hey, like I know intellectually, but it's in terms of I, in my earnest to do a good job for a family, I'm losing perspective on really what is potentially not only my scope, but what is potentially doable. And so that is part of my inner reflection. And I do get that. But it was a real teachable moment for me this week with everything that I've got going on.
So I wonder, do you feel like, as somebody as experienced as yourself, and I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here, do you feel that because you know of these things intellectually to the point where you're teaching, you're supporting, you're guiding, that it's almost harder to notice for yourself that those are important?
I think it's very individual. I think, I'm always a student of life. I'm never going to be there yet. That's just me personally. And I think people who are somewhat self-actualized are really very similar. They recognize that we're all imperfect humans. We really are. Like, everybody's just doing the best they can, right? And there's degrees of that, of course, right? There's degrees of everything, I think. But I think that I look at myself and yeah, I'm not perfect, but I am willing to learn because I want to grow. So there's times where, like, I don't look at it as good or bad or indifferent. I look at a place for me where I'm struggling is a sore spot for me. is giving me information that I probably need some more attention around this area in my life. And whether there's a teachable moment out of it or not, which there typically is okay. Like that's what we're here for, is to grow and become better versions of ourselves, is in service to the greater good of all, right? Not just ourselves.
Super cool. Thanks, Jen. Love
Thank
that.
you.
Um, so we've been talking a bit. You brought up grounding, you brought up meditation. Um, how do these sorts of practices contribute to our resilience and our sustainability over time in this field?
Well, there's certain things, like I was just listening to a study. I'm just trying to think if I could reference it this morning. I think it was Dan Siegel, actually. So they were talking, who's a neuroscientist and he's also a psychotherapist. He's a PhD. So he's no slough in any area. And he was talking about fundamentals, which sounds so simple. So we're talking about fundamentals such as sleep, nutrition, and movement. Now, everybody intellectually knows that this is something they should do, but now the science is clearly backing up how much it impacts everything from memory to brain care to metabolic health to the ability to cope and be resilient and handle stress or whatever it may be. I personally never really understood how much these levers, so I would call them the big three: energy, movement, and sleep, um, were contributing to your overall well-being, or how successful and healthy you would be overall. So when we talk about holistic health or holistic recovery, we're talking mind, body, spirit. Yes, but we can even dial it down even more. So these fundamentals are not a matter of opinion anymore. They're actually science backed, that they change certain things. Now, I'm not going to get into all of that, but just to give you a sense of what that is, we just discussed how it can impact brain chemistry, resilience, overall health, metabolic health, etc.
And it's almost interesting that those are the first things to often go when we feel burnt out, or are on the path to burnout rather, where you're like, yeah, I can stay up the extra few hours to get this thing done, or you know what, I have a lunch meeting. I have a meeting over lunch. I'll grab something to eat later, or historically I love going to the gym every day or 5 times a week. But you know what? There's not enough time because I have to build my business or I have to do this other thing. And I feel like entrepreneurs specifically, that's something that comes up quite commonly.
I think one of the things that I've learned most recently, and I don't think a lot of people practice it, is that when we set these goals around just the simple three, we think that if we don't do it 100% to perfection, that we're just going to board it. So if I can't get to the gym today and work 40 minutes, then I'm out. But what we really need is consistency. We need consistent, small, micro habits. So if I can't get to the gym today and do 30 minutes, can I do a walk? Can I do 10 jumping jacks? Can I do something, 1 minute of meditation? What can I do that's manageable? So when I set goals with clients now, I actually set minimal goals, like I call them floors and ceilings, so that we have a baseline of, rather than the abort that, oh, well, it's not going to happen. Because once you're out of it, the chances of you going back after day two or three are very, very slim. Your chances are very, they're severely undermined statistically. I don't know what that number is right now, but statistically, they're severely undermined. So if you don't go back in day two, the chances of you getting back are really that much harder. So we need to maintain some consistency of a micro moment of success so that we can get back into flow when the time allows.
And is it really about like, obviously there's a different physiological gain from
Mhm.
doing 10 jumping jacks as opposed to 30 minutes in the gym. Is it about that specifically, or is it about starting to be mindful about slotting that time in?
Both. Because your physiology, which is your state, is your psychology. So when someone is feeling depressed or negative or struggling with whatever, their physiology is very obvious, right? Just like if someone's excited and you walk into a room, the same thing, their physiology, you can feel the energy of someone, or you can walk into a room after an argument's happened and know something's gone down, right? Like that kind of thing. So energy is very real, and it holds a vibration. So when we get locked in, like I can't get off the couch kind of thing, and I'm gonna go and press another Netflix, your state is lowered, your brain is locked in into an addictive state. And so, unless you break that state, you're not going to be able to break that cycle. So, it's critical to move. And so, even getting up and walking around the block, even getting up and walking around your living room would be better than sitting on the couch and watching another thing because you just reinforce that habit. So, it is both, I think.
There's sort of this other side, and this is a term I hear being thrown around so much, and that's boundaries. Sorry, I can't do that. I have to set a boundary. And I guess, is that a lever that you feel that people should be pulling more? Like, if you're the entrepreneur who's sort of like grinding away at 80 hours a week, are boundaries something you would explore in setting with them? Or as a therapist, perhaps, we all want to help more and more and more, but do you set a boundary and say, you know what, 5 clients is the max I can do. I need to also do these other things.
So, I came late to the game with boundaries. I think women struggle with that a little differently than men, personally, because we're conditioned differently. That's why I think that. Um, I believe all behavior has purpose. So, you know, if we have a lack of boundaries, yes, it can come from the environment we've been brought up in, but it also can come from a very strong need to be liked, to be accepted, to feel part of something for many different reasons, right? And so people compromise their integrity all the time for secure attachment. I believe that sincerely. So, like, in order for me to be liked, I'll go use drugs. In order for me to be liked, I'll just be okay with some of the choices everybody else is making. It doesn't really matter what I think. What movie do you want to see or what restaurant do you want to go? It can be as benign as that, but you're not using your voice because you want to be easygoing or whatever. So it can be subtle, and then it can obviously be bigger things. So I do think boundaries are important, but I think with anything, when we're learning something, we kind of don't always get it right. So no means no in the right appropriate circumstances, but it also can be yes too. And I think especially with families with mental health and addiction and trauma, where the norm has been somewhat more of a dysfunctional rhythm, they like the classic would be family members. Well, you said no, don't do this because you're taught that maybe you're enabling your loved one, but when does it make sense? Like there may be a circumstance where it makes sense. So I think in the beginning when we're learning things, we can overextend ourselves. And I think we have to be more nimble in terms of setting those boundaries and learning because it's a new skill. We're not used to it, right? So, and sometimes it may be very appropriate and other times it may not be.
Yeah, and there's kind of this, like, when we think about boundaries, it's a very rigid thing, but it
Mhm.
can be important in some instances and not others. It's a tool that we can use to create some safety.
Yeah, it's definitely a tool for safety, but I think there's fear in people who have not had a lot of confidence in exercising their boundaries. That maybe if they say no one time and yes the other time, will they be able to say no again? You know what I'm saying? So it's just a skill that we need to learn. And I think we have to be more discerning. We really have to know when does it make common sense to make an exception, especially in the beginning, because not everybody's going to sort of get on board as quickly as maybe you decided to change the rules, right, of the game, right? They're not going to get it. So, we have to communicate effectively.
Really interesting. So, I've one more official question and
Mhm.
one less official question. The official question is, um, for somebody just getting into the space. I know we've kind of uh, driven the gamut where we've spoken about entrepreneurship, we've spoken about people in the caring profession, but people coming into these high personal impact jobs and lines of work. What advice would you give them? Um, to like, what advice would you give them in helping for them to structure resilience for themselves?
So I think we need to understand our internal language. Our internal language can be very strong. Should, must, do, like all the things that we were conditioned with, most of us anyway, except for this newer evolution generation coming forward. So you say what can they do to make them more resilient? So personal boundaries are obviously understanding, I think, integrity in the workplace and ethical integrity is absolutely an essential component of being wherever a person is. And if that is not happening, or they have an instinct that that is not happening, they need to escalate that. They need to call it out, because if it's going on for them, it means it's going on for someone else. And that's number one. But in terms of resilience, I think if we can look at behavior as, I say, all behavior has purpose, which means there's a reason why someone's acting out, there's a reason why someone's not speaking out, then we can understand it better. And so looking at it from a perspective of, there's no such thing as failure, there's only feedback, right? And either we're going to win from it or we're going to learn from it. So when we think things are going the way we don't want them to go, we tend to get hypercritical and self-judgy on ourselves and others, rather than looking, okay, this is information coming back to you. How can we make this information work? Because the truth is, if you learn from your feedback, the chances of you making the same mistake again are very almost nil. You got to take that information and go, you know what, that didn't work so well. Nix that. We're going to do this instead. Right. So I think it's really important to look at information. Number one, I think resilience is around balance, which I don't know if there's such a thing as balance. Like, that's a real far stretch. I'm on the train of coherence right now. So when I say that, is there more coherence within myself and others? Because balance is kind of a lofty goal. And I think for people who have complex histories, it's even more of a lofty goal. They never got balance in the first place, which is why they ended up in addiction. So, like, really, I think that's kind of a pie in the sky thing. But if we look for coherence as a measurement of, how is everything working? Is my mind and my body, am I spiritual? And that can even go into holistic, even my relationships. Is there coherence in my life? Do I feel like I'm so high strung, I'm going to, like, give the finger to the guy behind me or whatever? You know what I mean? Like, you're just like a loose cannon. Or is there some space in me to just step back and assess what needs to happen next? Right. So I think it's a combination of many different things. I'm not sure if I answered your question, to be honest with you.
No, no, I think you did a great job answering the question. I think I th- since I started this podcast a year ago, there's a challenge in taking a lot of these concepts that we're all starting to become more aware of in the past, especially since COVID, around mental health, around addiction, around mindfulness, and resilience is a great example of one that comes up as a key talking point. And I think we all look for simple answers, like, how do I build my resilience? It would be great to have a simple answer, but it's multifaceted. There's a lot of different elements, and I think it's really important and critical that you're talking to everything there. That is truly holistic. So I appreciate that.
And I'll just add one more thing on resilience. Resilience is a muscle, it needs to be built, just like consistency is a muscle. We tend to think that we've done something once and we should have all this amazing success. It's the same with recovery. Um, Anytime we're coming out of an adaptive way of being and entering into a new way of being, it's going to take, it's like mechanically driving your car. When you first drove your car or rode a bicycle, how much energy did it take to look in your rearview mirror, make sure nobody was hitting cars on both sides? It took everything. And then in no time at all, we're hydroplaning in our car. We're not even in our car, right? We're somewhere else when we're driving the car. So it becomes more automatic. And I think it's the same with, resilience or any new skill we're learning. We have to give it the time it deserves to learn it properly and be okay with the imperfection of the messiness of something, because there is a messy middle, I call, in anything I think humans are just messy, period. And the more we can really celebrate that and stop hiding behind our veneer that we're so perfect about everything, in which none of us are, I think we can really start being more real and have more authentic connection. And that's the barrier. Like, if you really knew me, and that's who I was when I first started this journey, if you really knew me, you would never like me, you'd hate me. I couldn't even look at myself in the mirror. That's how much self-hatred I had. So, I'm saying that for the person who's feeling like maybe they can't get themselves there. It really is an evolution and it's a journey and it requires practice all the time.
It's a real muscle
Mhm. Until it becomes second nature to us, right?
until we're hydroplaning through our resilience. Um, that's really impactful. Thanks, Jen. Um, our unofficial question, and you sort of started to touch on this, but um, recovery is also a bit of a roller coaster of a journey. And for anyone who's listening, um, who might be starting or in the depths of their recovery journey, I'm wondering what advice or thoughts you have to share with them.
I think recovery, like anything, isn't a perfect process. I think it's unique. And it really, I always say this, I don't really care how someone gets well as long as they do. But I think if you can take your own inner critic and your own judgment and perfectionism and shame out of the equation, you can soar because that is the inner workings of our conditioning that plays against us in this journey and evolution. And that was very much very real for me. It's taken time, as you can tell. I'm not a spring chicken and I'm well into my elder years now, and but you become wiser with all of that. So if you can impart that wisdom to people who are younger and earlier on in their evolution and journey, I think grab it because you don't deserve to struggle. And it doesn't have to be hard. It can be fun. It can be playful. It can be joyful because really you're getting a better life. This is the only illness in your life that you're actually going to get a better life. Like most illnesses, like they take you out in one way or the other, or there's, modifications. There are modifications in sort of recovery maintenance lifestyle, but overall, you do get a better life.
For all the listeners out there, Jen, where can people find you? Where can people learn more about the amazing work you do?
They can go to info at therecoveryconcierge.com. So info at therecoveryconcierge.com. And they should be able to find me or go to my website, recoveryconcierge.com. And we've got a resource for called freebies, freebies.therecoveryconcierge.com. So I guess you could provide the links at some point and they could find it that way.
The links will be in the description of this episode on streaming platforms everywhere. Um, and that's where you can listen to more episodes of Five Facts as well. Jen, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. I learned so much, and I can't wait to talk to you again.
Likewise. Thank you for having me, Jonathan. Very much appreciated.